The courtroom buzzed with the usual murmur of lawyers shuffling papers, reporters whispering into their recorders, and spectators craning to get a glimpse of the infamous Diddy sitting at the defense table, polished as always, her posture relaxed, her smile faint and calculated. No one expected anything extraordinary that day. It was supposed to be just another hearing in what many assumed was a basic tax evasion case dressed up with celebrity glamour. But everything changed when the doors opened and Ben Affleck entered the room. The entire room shifted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, heads turned, eyebrows raised. Some mouths even dropped open. He wasn't expected. He wasn't listed on the docket. Yet, there he was, walking past the benches, past the prosecution's table, his shoulders square, his face set in a hard line. It wasn't the walk of an actor showing up to support his ex-wife. It was the walk of a man on a mission, and everyone sensed it. Diddy looked up from her folder, saw him, and for the first time in the public eye, her mask slipped. The flicker of confusion in her eyes quickly gave way to something colder, more calculating. But even she couldn't hide the twitch in her jaw. The judge peered down at the new arrival. "Mr. Affleck," he said, "do you understand the nature of your testimony and the consequences of perjury in a federal court?" Ben didn't glance at Diddy. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. He took the stand, swore the oath, and then looked directly at the jury, not with the performative charm of an actor, but with the heavy burden of someone who had held in too much for too long. "I'm here today," Ben began, "because I can no longer remain silent. What started as suspicion turned into certainty. What I discovered goes beyond tax fraud. It's deeper, it's darker, it's dangerous." The court was silent, the kind of silence that hangs heavy, pressing down on lungs and minds. Even the defense attorneys, now stiff and whispering furiously into each other's ears, couldn't disrupt the gravity in Ben's voice. "When we reunited in 2021, he continued, I thought we had both grown, matured. I thought we were giving our love a second chance. But 6 months in, things began to shift. She would get calls in the middle of the night, always stepping out of the room, whispering, brushing it off as business. Her trips increased. She'd vanish for days with vague explanations about shoots or studio meetings. Her team often knew nothing about these appointments. When I asked, she'd smile, always that smile, and tell me not to worry. And I wanted to believe her. I truly did." He paused then, swallowed hard, looked down briefly, then up again. "One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up, and she wasn't beside me. I searched the house and found her in the home office, quickly shutting a video call. She said it was just work stuff. But what I saw for only a second was footage of what looked like surveillance from a private residence, not a set, not a studio, real homes. That was when I knew something was very wrong." He leaned forward slightly. "I tried asking questions. I tried giving her the benefit of the doubt. But every time I got closer to the truth, she got more defensive. Then came the moment I'll never forget. While looking for a copy of our joint tax returns in her private study, she had a locked closet. Something I'd never questioned before I accidentally pressed a hidden switch. A panel slid open. Behind it was a safe. I tried the date we first met, July 24th, 2002. The safe clicked open. A reporter gasped quietly from the gallery. Inside were 3 cell phones, 5 passports all bearing her photo but under different names, and a laptop. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. but I knew I had to look. Ben's voice didn't crack, but something about the way he spoke now, slower, almost like he was still digesting the memory, made the entire courtroom lean forward. The phones contained text messages with names I didn't recognize, accounts, transactions. But it was the videos that broke me. These weren't blackmail materials. These were logs, insurance. Every meeting she had, every deal, every drop point, every coded instruction was filmed, cataloged, and stored for control. Ben now looked at the judge. Your Honor, I have submitted all evidence to the prosecution, including backups. But what's important to understand is that the tax evasion charge is just the surface. This is a multi-layered operation of laundering funds through entertainment ventures, world tours, beauty lines, even film budgets. Diddy Combs' lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is a character assassination. Mr. Affleck is not a financial expert. The judge held up a hand. He is an eyewitness. Continue, Mr. Affleck. Ben didn't waste a beat. She structured everything to appear legal. Her team only ever saw slices of the puzzle. No one saw the full picture. She moved millions through shell companies, disguised as venue fees or production budgets. But the real kicker? Her so-called reinvestment into her beauty empire. That money didn't come from sales. It came from offshore accounts, the branding campaigns, laundering fronts. There was one video I'll never forget. She's in a penthouse suite in Dubai, casually discussing with the man identified later as a known associate of the Veracruz cartel how to route money from 3 Central American branches into a chain of pop-up stores in Europe. A murmur rose, then died. I confronted her once, he said, now visibly haunted. Just once. I asked where the money came from. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and told me, "This isn't a world you understand." And that was it. She never mentioned it again, and I pretended like it never happened. But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't look at her the same. His voice lowered. Then a young woman, a production assistant named Lena, disappeared. She had been asking questions about the budget of a film Jennifer was producing. The official story was that she took an international gig, but I saw her name in the ledger in the safe. She was listed as See Target Inquiry. That was when I knew I had to act. He looked toward the jury. I'm not proud of having waited. I loved her, and love, as powerful as it is, should never override what's right. The judge looked to the prosecution. Your motion? The lead federal attorney stood. In light of Mr. Affleck's testimony and submitted evidence, we request an immediate review of the material and the issuance of an arrest warrant for Diddy Comb on charges including but not limited to money laundering, conspiracy, tax fraud, and obstruction of justice. Diddy Comb's legal team scrambled, objecting furiously, citing procedural missteps and a lack of cross-examination. The judge overruled. The evidence will be reviewed now. Court officers, bring in the evidence container. 2 agents wheeled in a sealed briefcase. Ben authenticated the devices, the phones, the passports, the hard drives. The courtroom display screen came alive. The first video played. Diddy Comb was seen instructing a staffer, her voice calm. Keep each transaction under $10,000. Use merchandise receipts. Vary the dates. Always use multiple accounts. The gallery gasped. Another video showed her at a rooftop bar with 2 known criminal financiers, laughing about how easy it was to hide behind tour promotions. Diddy Comb sat frozen. Her face, once serene, now drawn tight. Her lips were colorless. Her lawyer tried to interject again, but the judge silenced him. The final video played. Diddy threatening a staff accountant who tried to flag the inconsistencies. Her words were cold, her eyes empty. "If you bring this up again," she had said, "you'll disappear just like Lena." Gasps turned into stunned silence. When the video ended, the prosecution spoke again. "We renew our motion for immediate arrest." The judge didn't hesitate. Motion granted. 2 federal agents stepped forward. Diddy turned to Ben. "How could you?" she whispered, tears finally rising. "After everything." Ben met her eyes. "This isn't about us. It's about the truth. It's about the people you hurt." She whispered harshly, "No one will believe you." "They already do," Ben replied. The handcuffs clicked, and in that moment the courtroom knew they were witnessing history. Not the fall of a superstar, but the unmasking of a myth. Diddy wasn't just another entertainer. She had been a shadow queen, ruling with secrets, and now the shadows were gone. The light, however painful, had finally come in. Outside the courthouse, chaos had erupted like a dam break-in. The steps of the Manhattan Federal Building were swarmed with cameras. Reporters shouting over each other, microphones stretched forward like spears hoping to catch a single word from anyone involved. But Ben Affleck didn't stop. He exited through the side, surrounded by 2 marshals, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, his shoulders weighed down not by fear, but by years of silence that had finally been shattered. He didn't speak, didn't wave, didn't even glance at the crowd now roaring with questions. Across every screen in America, his testimony had already begun replaying in clips. Ben revealing the contents of the hidden safe, the videos of Diddy instructing money movements, the trembling but unwavering look in his eyes as he described watching the woman he once loved turn into something unrecognizable. On Twitter, hashtags exploded. #Diddy down, #Affleck testifies, #Vault of Secrets. News anchors went live within minutes, voices pitched high with urgency. In a stunning development, they repeated like a hymn, "Diddy the beloved international superstar, has been arrested on charges of money laundering, tax fraud, and obstruction of justice moments after explosive courtroom testimony from her ex-husband, Ben Affleck." Within hours, the fallout began to spread. The board of directors for Diddy Beauty convened an emergency meeting. By the end of the day, the CEO, handpicked by Diddy herself, had resigned. The stock plummeted by 27% before trading was frozen. Sponsors pulled advertisements. Retail partners pulled her products from shelves. One by one, doors slammed shut. But perhaps most jarring was the internal unraveling that happened quietly behind closed doors. Her team publicists, managers, creative directors suddenly went radio silent. The group chat that once buzzed with travel schedules and press events went dark. A few key staffers deleted their professional accounts entirely. Others issued vague statements of shock and heartbreak, trying desperately to distance themselves without admitting knowledge. But there were whispers. Whispers that a few of them had seen signs, had received orders that didn't make sense, had signed documents they now wished they had read more carefully. In a lavish estate tucked in the Miami hills, federal agents executed a search warrant. The mansion was sprawling, secluded behind triple gates and cameras that had all been wiped the moment the warrant hit the system. Inside, investigators uncovered more than they expected. Custom safes embedded in marble walls, encrypted drives inside decorative vases, and an entire closet filled with flash drives labeled only by dates. The lead agent reportedly paused when he opened a drawer in the master bedroom, revealing a stack of journals written by Diddy herself. The entries weren't emotional ramblings. They were plans, names, targets, amounts, a ledger in narrative form. It would take months to decode. Meanwhile, on the West Coast, the entertainment industry began its own collapse. Every project Diddy had touched albums, endorsement deals, pending film releases was put on hold or canceled outright. The upcoming international tour, which had been forecasted to generate $110 million in revenue, was officially called off. Venues issued refunds. Dancers and musicians were left jobless overnight. Insurance companies scrambled. The ripple effect reached everyone. Back in New York, Diddy sat alone in a holding cell beneath the courthouse. Her hair, always perfectly styled, was tied back in a simple ponytail. Her makeup was long gone. She stared at the opposite wall in silence, not speaking to the guard, not asking for water, not touching the food. Her attorney tried to speak with her, but she waved him away. She knew what this meant. She didn't need anyone to explain it. The mask was gone. That same day, a young woman named Maya Sheridan stepped forward. She was a former assistant stylist for Diddy someone who had worked closely with her on photo shoots, press junkets, and award shows. In a quiet interview with a national news outlet, Maya revealed that years earlier, she had been ordered to transport packages labeled as promotional gifts to international destinations. She had no idea what was inside. When she asked questions, she was dismissed. When she refused once, she was fired the next day. "I thought it was just diva behavior," she said, eyes downcast. "Now I wonder what I helped cover up." Other accounts followed. A former accountant revealed discrepancies he had flagged, only to be silenced and later reassigned. A personal driver admitted he had delivered sealed briefcases to a series of luxury condos under strict instructions never to ask questions. A choreographer claimed that half the venues booked on Diddy last world tour were unusually remote, with audiences that didn't match the ticket sales. "It never made sense," he said. "But she was the boss, and we just assumed she had a vision." Online, the narrative fractured. Some fans clung to disbelief, creating conspiracy theories that Ben Affleck had been manipulated or blackmailed into testifying. Others began combing through old interviews, music videos, Instagram posts searching for clues. They found strange captions, odd business partnerships, flashy charity events that had no public reporting, private jets logged in FAA records to countries where Diddy claimed she'd never visited. Everything became evidence. Meanwhile, the FBI released a partial statement. "We are currently investigating multiple individuals connected to the financial operations of Ms. Diddy. Our primary focus is on uncovering the full scope of potential criminal activity, both domestic and international." In the legal world, opinions were split. Some believed Diddy would cut a deal, offer names, expose bigger players. Others thought she would stay silent, betting that her image carefully curated over decades would shield her from the worst consequences. But no one could deny that the myth had cracked. And behind it was something cold and calculating. As the sun set on that first full day of fallout, Ben Affleck sat in a quiet hotel room, far from the courthouse, away from the noise. He had turned off his phone. His publicist was fielding calls from every major outlet on Earth. He didn't care. He sat alone, looking out the window, watching as lights blinked across the skyline like Morse code from another universe. He thought of the first time he saw her on the stage. The energy, the confidence, the laugh. He thought of their wedding in Georgia, the second chance that felt like destiny. He thought of the night he opened the safe and realized he didn't know her at all. A knock at the door. It was his lawyer. Quiet, respectful. "They want you back in court tomorrow," he said, "just for evidentiary follow-up. Should be brief." Ben nodded. No words, just silence. After the door closed, he sat back, took a deep breath, and exhaled like he was trying to release a decade. He didn't feel vindicated. He felt hollow. But somewhere beneath that emptiness was something else, the thin edge of clarity. The knowledge that he had finally done what needed to be done. He had pulled the curtain, and now the world would see what lay behind it. The following morning, the courtroom looked different. Not in design or decor, but in weight. The air hung thicker, conversations more subdued, glances exchanged with quiet urgency. Federal agents lined the back wall with sterner faces, and the press bench, usually filled with banter and low chuckles, sat in tense silence. Something unspoken told everyone. This wasn't just about Diddy anymore. This was bigger. The prosecution began the day by introducing a new witness, a young man with a nervous posture and a tight grip on his briefcase. He introduced himself as Elijah Cruz, a former freelance software engineer contracted by a private security firm that had been subcontracted by one of Diddy entertainment subsidiaries. The name of that firm, Onyx Layer Systems, had barely been whispered outside NDA-sealed rooms. Elijah was the first to speak it in public. "I was hired to create a series of data masking scripts," Elijah began, eyes darting between the lawyers and the jury. "At the time, I believed it was for privacy protections on ticketing platforms. But as I looked deeper, I noticed something strange. The APIs I built weren't just anonymizing buyer data, they were rerouting financial flows across several mirror accounts, often using cryptocurrency mixers." Murmurs erupted. The judge banged his gavel once but didn't stop the witness. Elijah leaned forward. "I reported this to my supervisor. The next day, my contract was terminated, my access revoked, and I received a cease and desist letter claiming breach of protocol. That's when I started saving everything I could." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a hard drive. The prosecutor handled it carefully. "The drive contains what?" "Screenshots, code logs, access timestamps, enough to map the movement of approximately $67 million across 10 different shell companies in 4 countries, all connected directly or indirectly to Diddy Enterprises." The room fell silent. The judge exhaled slowly. "Please submit this to the court," he said, and agents moved to secure the device. Ben Affleck watched from the gallery now, no longer a witness on the stand, but still the nucleus of the storm. His hands were folded tightly in his lap. He didn't flinch. The prosecution then played a new clip, this one taken from one of the flash drives seized from Diddy Miami estate. The video showed her in a candle-lit lounge flanked by 2 sharply dressed men. Her voice was low, confident. "Once they've signed the 3rd contract, that's when we start pivoting funds. Don't go too fast, let it look organic. And make sure someone from legal reviews the shell documentation so it passes first scrutiny. Remember, it's not about hiding the money. It's about making the movement look boring." One of the men laughed. "Boring? The IRS doesn't dig when it's bored," she replied, swirling her drink. "That's the trick." The judge looked stunned. The defense team stood again, crying foul over unverified footage and invasion of privacy. But the prosecution countered that all materials were lawfully seized, cataloged, and matched to metadata from Diddy Combs' own devices. The judge agreed to proceed. Then came the second bombshell. A folder labeled Insurance had been partially decrypted by FBI cyber forensics. Inside were blackmail materials on dozens of individuals ranging from accountants to producers to low-level interns, every file meticulously cataloged with images, audio clips, private emails, compromising footage. Ben Affleck was in there. So were two former federal agents. So was the governor of Nevada. A spreadsheet projected onto the courtroom screen revealed dates, names, leverage types, and in one damning column labeled Control Status, the words Compliant, Doubtful, Under Observation. The judge ordered the screen cut off after gasps echoed across the courtroom. "This isn't a courtroom," one reporter tweeted. "It's a volcano, and it just erupted." Meanwhile, in a quiet suburb of New Jersey, another domino fell. An assistant director who had worked on a Netflix docuseries starring Diddy Comb came forward anonymously. He admitted that many of the financials around the production had never added up. Payments went out to vendors that didn't exist, gear rentals for equipment never used, catering invoices with duplicate charges. "We just assumed it was typical Hollywood fluff," he said. "Now, I think it was laundering." The walls were closing in. That afternoon, prosecutors introduced another key witness, Camille Sinclair, a former legal assistant for one of Diddy Combs' holding companies. She had remained silent for nearly 2 years after signing an ironclad non-disclosure agreement. But once she saw Ben testify, she said something shifted. She contacted the FBI. Camille, a woman in her 30s with calm poise and a voice like someone who had practiced every sentence in the mirror, recounted in precise detail how internal memos were altered before being sent to auditors. "We weren't just covering up errors," she said. "We were engineering illusions." One such memo Camille submitted to the court outlined a list of pre-planned interview questions to be fed to journalists ahead of a major Vanity Fair cover. In the email, Diddy Comb herself allegedly approved a line that read, "Make sure they ask about the struggle it keeps me relatable." Camille sighed. Nothing was accidental. Even her vulnerability was curated. On social media, reactions fractured further. Loyalists claimed Diddy Comb was being taken down for being too powerful, too rich, too independent. Others felt betrayed. The same fans who had written essays about her rise, defended her against past accusations, bought every product she endorsed, now posted TikToks burning her merchandise. In one particularly viral video, a young woman stared into the camera with glassy eyes and whispered, "She told us she was self-made. We believed her. We defended her. What were we defending?" Behind bars, Diddy Combs' legal team scrambled. Plea deals were floated. Negotiations happened behind closed doors. Rumors swirled that she might name names, that she might unravel the rest of the web. But she remained silent. Not a single comment, no press release, no statement through attorneys. Her silence became as loud as the evidence. That night, major publications released retrospective expos. One detailed how Diddy Combs' team had quietly sued or silenced at least 27 individuals over the past decade using settlements bundled with airtight NDAs. Another broke down the international paper trail, highlighting tour stops in countries with lax financial regulations. A third, more haunting, compiled testimonies from former staff who described a culture of fear cloaked in glitter. "She didn't yell," said one. "She didn't threaten. She just knew things about everyone. You'd say something in confidence on a Tuesday, and by Thursday it was used to control you." The next day, the court reconvened with the final witness of the week. Her name was Lena Moreau. The assistant everyone thought had disappeared. She walked into the courtroom with a tremble in her fingers and steel in her eyes. "They told you I vanished," she said, addressing the jury. "I didn't. I ran." Lena had fled to Montreal after discovering she was being monitored, after noticing her apartment had been broken into and her emails altered. "I was scared," she said, "and when I reached out for help, nobody believed me. Nobody wanted to believe she was capable of this." Lena detailed how she had been assigned to review backstage expenditures during the Monaco leg of Diddy Combs' last tour, and found tens of thousands of dollars going toward consultants that no one could verify. When she questioned it, she was asked to sign a non-disclosure addendum to her contract. She refused. That week, her key card stopped working. Her email account was disabled. She received a notice of contract termination and a warning that she was being reviewed for breach of protocol. "That's when I knew I had to disappear," she said, "because it wasn't just financial misconduct. It was a system built on fear, manipulation, and leverage." Her return was a shock even to the prosecutors, and when she turned over her own copies of backstage ledgers and encrypted audio files recorded during what she described as accidental proximity to sensitive conversations, the courtroom felt like it had passed a point of no return. Ben Affleck watched as Lena stepped down, her testimony finished. Their eyes met. She nodded. A silent thank you for opening the door, for making space, for showing that the truth, even if delayed, still had a pulse. As the court adjourned that day, no one spoke as they exited. No one needed to. The silence wasn't empty. It was dense. The kind of silence that follows a deep crack through a structure long believed to be unbreakable. And though the trial wasn't over, the myth of Diddy Comb was. Not with a bang, but with a courtroom full of people who had finally stopped pretending she was something she wasn't. When the court reconvened on the final day of the week, the room no longer felt like a courtroom. It felt like a reckoning chamber. The walls, though unchanged, seemed to breathe with the weight of everything that had unfolded within them. The seal of the United States behind the judge's bench didn't look ceremonial anymore. It looked like judgment itself, etched in oak. Diddy Comb entered through the side door, escorted by 2 federal marshals. She wore the same slate-gray blazer as the day before, but this time it hung differently on her frame. Her stride, still deliberate, was slower. Her chin tilted slightly lower. Her eyes no longer scanned the room for allies. There were none left. Ben Affleck sat quietly in the gallery, flanked by agents who had become his constant shadows in recent days. He didn't look triumphant. He looked finished, like a man who had poured everything he had into a moment and was now standing in the echo of its consequences. Across the nation, networks had cleared airtime. A verdict wasn't expected, not yet, but everyone could feel that something final would happen today. It wasn't a legal conclusion, it was a moral one. The prosecution began by laying out the cumulative evidence again, not to reiterate, but to cement. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the falsified contracts, the blackmail dossiers, the videos, the silence of her inner circle broken wide open by Lena's return. Each piece not just a brick in a wall of guilt, but a reflection of who she had become. Or perhaps who she had always been. Then came the unexpected. The judge addressed the court and announced that an emergency closed-door hearing had taken place the night before with senior officials from the Justice Department. After reviewing the scope of the evidence and the potential implications for national financial security, the department would be forming a special independent task force to investigate all individuals connected to Diddy Combs' financial web. Subpoenas had already been issued to several of her former business partners, including international figures. The courtroom shifted with a collective breath. This wasn't just about her anymore. She was the fuse. The bomb was still unraveling. Then the judge turned to her. "Ms. Diddy Combe, you have the right to speak before the court adjourns for sentencing." For a long moment, she said nothing. She stared at her hands folded on the table. The room waited, and then, slowly, she stood. When she spoke, her voice wasn't loud, but it reached every corner. "I built everything I ever had with my name," she said, "and I protected it with everything I could." Her tone was flat, but there was a thin current of something underneath defiance or regret. It wasn't clear. "People like me aren't born with safety nets. I came from nothing. I was told no. I was told I wasn't enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't marketable enough, so I did what I had to do." She paused, looking at the jury. "You can call it manipulation. You can call it criminal. I called it survival." One of the jurors looked away, visibly uncomfortable. "And yes," she added, "I recorded everything. Because I knew one day I might need to protect myself not from criminals, but from the people who claim to be legitimate. I knew the game. I just played it better." Her lawyer placed a hand on her elbow, perhaps to stop her, but she brushed it off. "Ben," she said now, eyes locking with him, "you said this wasn't about us, but it was always about us. You weren't angry about the money. You were angry that I didn't need you anymore." Ben didn't move. His face remained still. "You think you've exposed me?" she finished. "But all you've done is shine a light on a system that's never been clean." The judge didn't respond. He nodded once and turned to the prosecution. "Is there anything further?" "Yes, Your Honor," the lead attorney replied. "Given the evidence and testimony, the government formally requests maximum sentencing under federal guidelines and the immediate seizure of all known assets tied to the criminal enterprise." The judge looked down, then nodded. "Motion granted. Sentencing will be held in 30 days. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in federal custody." Diddy Combe didn't flinch. As the marshals stepped forward, she turned to Ben one last time. "I hope the silence feels like justice," she said, "because it's all you'll have left." Then she was gone. The cuffs clicked, the doors opened, the icon dissolved. That evening, Ben Affleck walked alone through the back exit. No cameras, no questions. He walked 2 blocks in silence before stopping under a street lamp outside a bookstore. He stared at the closed sign. It was late. The city pulsed around him, but didn't touch him. Later, in an interview that would air weeks later, a journalist would ask him, "Do you feel like a hero?" Ben looked away from the camera, lips tightening. "No," he said. "I feel like a man who finally stopped lying to himself." That night, across Los Angeles, panic meetings filled executive offices. Film projects were frozen, endorsements pulled, lawsuits drafted. Artists who had once stood on stage with Diddy Combe rushed to edit old photos. Everyone was afraid of what might surface, of what else the vault might hold, of the myth no longer shielding them. And in a maximum security holding cell in downtown Manhattan, Diddy Combe sat in silence. No music, no lights, no scripts. Just the hum of overhead fluorescent bulbs and the echo of footsteps outside her door. She stared at the blank wall, not thinking of courtrooms or betrayals, not planning next moves, just still. For the first time in decades, the show was over. Across America, fans whispered through screens. Some mourned, some raged, others simply stared into the void she left behind. Because Diddy hadn't just built an empire. She had built belief. That talent could rise, that strength could triumph, that beauty meant truth. And now that belief had cracked. In its place was something colder, realer, a reminder that not all icons are built on greatness. Some are built on secrets, and eventually every secret demands its price. The reckoning wasn't just hers. It belonged to all who believed the myth and watched it fall in silence.